Hello, hello everybody. I would like to talk about a book called Deschooling Society from Ivan Illich. Ivan Illich was an Austrian Roman Catholic priest, theologian, philosopher, and social critic. His book from 1971 called Deschooling Society criticizes modern society institutional approach to education. An approach that constrains learning to narrow situations in a fairly short period of the human lifespan. Well, this is the things that you can read in Wikipedia. But what does it mean that Deschooling Society? Well, it's very related to a concept that's called homeschooling. Basically to school your kids, school to teach students at home. Why not to send them to schools? Well, Ivan talks about this deeply on his book. I have a few passages here that I would like to read and comment for you guys. The first ones that I pick up was this. It says, "The pupil is thereby schooled to confuse teaching with learning, great advancement with education, a diploma with competence, and fluency with the ability to say something new. His imagination is schooled to accept service in place of value. Medical treatment is mistaken for healthcare, social work for the improvement of community life, police protection for safety, military poise for national security, the rat race for productive work. Health, learning, dignity, independence, and creative endeavor are defined as little more than the performance of the institutions which claim to serve these ends, and their improvement is made to depend on allocating more resources to the management of hospitals, schools, and other agencies in question." Meaning, like, school it belongs to other kinds of institutions in our society that make us depend heavily on them. They make us dependent on the state, on these bodies that supposedly will help us keep our health, keep us educated, keep us protected, keep us independent, which is obviously not the case. If we can see the society, how it works, we can understand that someone that doesn't have the resources to pay for the healthcare or for that school, the education, or for the protection for someone, you will not get this. And the individual and the families are really heavily dependent on the state to get these services. And of course what he says here is, well, school is not in the job of make you independent or make you free from these constraints, from these bodies. It will actually school you in a way that will come to accept these things as an inevitability. Let's read another passage. "The average citizen defines an adequate education by North American standards, even though the chance of getting such prolonged schooling is limited to a tiny minority. In these countries, the majority is already hooked on school, that is, they are schooled in a sense of inferiority towards the better school. Their fanaticism in favor of school makes it possible to exploit them doubly. It permits increasing allocation of public funds for the education of a few and increasing acceptance of social control by the many." So he used the example of North American standards to show that Okay, in the countries that supposedly, if you will get more education, you will be better off. If the state invests more in education, people will be better better well off. But what happens is that in any country that you live, usually you will compare the education that you receive in your country with the education that other people receive in a other country, usually a better off country, unless you have born in a very very wealthy country. So what happens is like usually there's a competition happening between who is better school. It doesn't matter what is the education, how much is the education, the cost of the education. Usually you will be less than someone else. And if you're poor and you're born in a poor country, then your situation is really bad, because not only your education will be worse, you also will come to learn that your education is inferior, of course, to the many others that have the resources and have their opportunities that you don't have. Of course, that will make you passive. That will put the blame on you or in your family, or the fact that you were being poor, and not on the system itself. It says, neither in North America nor in Latin America do the poor get equality from obligatory schools. But in both places, the mere existence of school discourages and disables the poor from taking control of their own learning. All over the world, the school has an anti-education effect on society. School is recognized as the institution which specializes in education. The failures of school are taken by most people as a proof that education is a very costly, very complex, always arcane, and frequently almost impossible task. So we come to believe, after being educated about in our society about what school is, that we come to understand education is school. And if we don't get being educated, is being that if you had the possibility to go to a school, then you've been educated. If not, there's not possible that you get an education. And but well, that depends on, it will always be costly, complex, it will be very difficult, and it will make you, as I said before, very passive, because you will come to depend exclusively on school for your education. Let's read another passage. It says, obligatory schooling inevitably polarizes a society. It also grades the nations of the world according to an international caste system. Countries are rated like castes whose educational dignity is determined by the average years of schooling of its citizens, a rating which is closely related to per capita gross national product, and much more painful. So it is really a caste system, an international caste system. If you're born in Indonesia, you know that your level of education will be better off if you are emigrate to Europe, for example, or you are study in a university in Europe. And if you are born in France, you know that the education that you will receive in a country in Africa will be much worse. So that creates inevitably a sense of some are better, some are worse. Some people are educated and advanced, some people are ignorant and they are delayed. So that makes societies in general to compete, to people to compete. It doesn't create collaboration. And of course that creates anger, it creates war, it creates resentment, it fuels the inequality and maintains the inequality that already exists instead of fighting against it. It says equal education opportunity is indeed both a desirable and feasible goal, but to equate this with obligatory schooling is to confuse salvation with the church. School has become the world religion of a modernized proletariat and makes futile promises of salvation to the poor of the technological age. The nation state has adopted it, drafting all citizens into a graded curriculum leading to sequential diplomas not unlike the initiation rituals of hieratic promotions of former times. So this is very scary indeed. This means that school is our new religion, and if you want to be saved, just like if you're a Christian, you know that you have to go to church. Then if in our modern your civilization, the nation state that we live in, we want to be blessed, we want to be part of the community, we have to go to school. That's what all been learned, that we have to go to school to be civilized. Universal schooling was meant to detach role assignment from personal life history. It was meant to give everybody an equal chance to any office. Even now, many people wrongly believe that school ensures the dependence of public trust on relevant learning achievements. However, instead of equalizing chances, the school system has monopolized their distribution. So there's only one school usually, and it's this school that will, if you are born in a country, this is this school, the public school, that will give you that education that supposedly we need. And who are the ones that carry this education? The teachers. Well, not everybody can be a teacher. You need a diploma, and diplomas depend on the schools and on the universities that are also depending on the state. So there's no way you can have an independent factor in it when everything is dependent on the nation state. To being a teacher, you have to pass through these steps. And there's no way that somebody that will have a bad personal history or a history of not being in school in a regular way will be able to be considered a teacher in any meaningful way. Maybe it's an independent teacher, but not in a school system. That breaks obviously the equality, the supposed equality of our system and the universal opportunities. If we are dependent on what we did or what we studied, then of course, or where we study, then the school is just a monopoly of the education, of the resources. There's no other way that you can go to get educated that will not be a school. Most learning happens casually, and even most intentional learning is not the result of program instruction. Most people who learn a second language will do so as a result of odd circumstances and not of sequential teaching. But the fact that a great deal of learning even now seems to happen casually and as a byproduct of some other activity defined as work or leisure does not mean that planned learning does not benefit from planned instruction and that both do not stand in need of improvement. Drill instruction, which costs less than comparable schooling, is now a privilege of those rich enough to bypass the schools, and those who either the army or big business sends through in-service training. There should be no obstacle for anyone at any time of his life to be able to choose instruction among hundreds of definable skills at public expense. So, education is much more than learning a skill. I think we understand this when we think in our families and our parents. But we come to believe that a learning is actually dependent usually from instruction about others to teach you what to do, how to do it, and in a sequential manner, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you have to do it in a series of steps. But it gives an example here of, for example, a second language. It's not true that we learn a second language by learning one word first and another second and another third. But this connected, sometimes it's very odd circumstances. Maybe you like to listen some type of music and then you end up learning certain words, and that leads you to learn more and be more interested. And then in that process you are learning. That learning was not sequential, but nonetheless we don't call that you are learning. We make it seem as if you really want to learn, you do need a teacher. Well, this doesn't mean that we don't need to plan a learning, and that we will be able to improve a lot by planning our learning. In fact, that's why we usually want to plan certain words to learn. For example, learning a language, or we want to learn certain things first and some grammar. But maybe that will not be sequential. Maybe it can be planned in another way. That can also be improved. There's not only one way to do it. It talks about drill instruction. Well, drill instruction it says it costs less than comparable schooling. And it's now a privilege of those rich enough to bypass the schools. Meaning that, well, if you go to a private school, well, you will be able to jump all those others requirements that usually public schools have and other institutions have. But usually this is a privilege of having money and having certain position, that it will allow you to not to have those requirements met before you come to learn something. Skilled teachers are made scarce by the belief in the value of licenses. Certification constitutes a form of market manipulation and is plausible only to a school mind. Many young teachers, if given the proper incentives, programs, and access to tools, are better than most school teachers at introducing their peers to the scientific exploration of plants, stars, and matter, and to discovery of how and why a motor or radio functions. The deschooling of society implies a recognition of the two-phase nature of learning. An insistence on skill drill alone could be a disaster. Equal emphasis must be placed on other kinds of learning. But if schools are the wrong places for learning a skill, they are even worse places for getting an education. School does both tasks badly, partly because it does not distinguish between them. School is inefficient in skill instruction, especially because it is curricular. In most schools, a program which is meant to improve one's skill is chained always to another irrelevant task. So, if we have a skill and we want to teach that skill, for example, we know how to carve wood and we want to make a living of it, we want to teach our skills to our family, our neighbors, our friends, the strangers that they want to learn. Well, we can do that, and we could be, why not one day we could be considered teachers, but not for the institutions. Moreover, if we can distinguish, if we start to distinguish what is education and what is school, we come to learn that, well, school does not educate us, that would be family sometimes, and school does not teach us skills either. Sometimes it's just theories about very abstract matters that doesn't apply to a very concrete skill, for example, to learn how to cut wood. We can improve both things, and we don't need a school institution for that matter. Most skills, he says, most skills can be acquired and improved by drills, because skill implies the mastery of definable and predictable behavior. Education in the exploratory and creative use of skills, however, cannot rely on drills. It relies on the relationship between partners who already have some of the keys which give access to memories stored in and by the community. The skill instructor relies on the arrangement of set circumstances which permit the learner to develop standard responses. The educational guide or master is concerned with helping matching partners to meet so that learning can take place. Matching partners for educational purposes initially seems more difficult to imagine than finding skilled instructors and partners for a game. One reason is the deep fear which school has implanted in us, the unlimited opportunity for meeting among people who share an issue which for them, at the moment, is socially, intellectually, and emotionally important. I have frequently witnessed how discussions grow in social awareness and how they are impelled to take political action as fast as they learn to read. They seem to take reality into their hands as they write it down. So we can have, I think what he's saying in these few passages, we can have skill instructors and we can have tasks to learn how to learn this skill. That will be a skill instructor, how to carve wood. We can learn that with a teacher, and he can measure how a skill is developed by simple standard responses. But what happened with the educational guide or the master is a different kind of teacher. And this is not that easy to define, because what is a matter of concern to me in my society maybe is a matter of, for other person is not a matter of concern. Maybe another issues are more important. So who is one to say which thing is the right thing to learn now? Well, it depends on people, it depends on society. And what an educational guide or a master could be doing is to match, as Ivan is saying, try to make those people with the two people with the same concerns to match each other and to talk about it and to connect to each other, to talk about these issues and learn from each other, share ideas, and seeing how these things can be discussed and improved. Not just by telling to them to shut up and to do what they're told because this is the right way to think about this, or this is the right way to do something, when it actually could be thought in many different ways. But we are not allowed to think in this way, because that will disrupt our entire societies. What about here in this passage, talking about the phenomenology of school? I select two lines here. It says, In the Andes, you till the soil once you have become useful. Before that, you watch the sheep. If you are well nourished, you should be useful by 11 and otherwise by 12. Most people around the world then either do not want or cannot get modern childhood for their offspring. But it also seems that childhood is a burden to a good number of those few who are allowed to it. Many of them are simply forced to go through it and are not all happy playing their child's role. So school creates childhood. That's what it means by these passages. If you live in Andes, if you live in the mountains, in the Andes in South America, well, as soon as you are able to handle the sheep or your hands are already developed, you will have to help the village with the task, with the family with the task. But in our societies, they tell us that there's a step in our development that is called childhood, and in this childhood, well, you should be accustomed to get in the habit of receiving orders and do what you're told, and have very very narrow concerns and not to mess with the adults world. Well, maybe this childhood, this role that society create for us, maybe it's not that all true in our modern society. Maybe we can think in a different way, because maybe it's school that is creating this role, that's creating the childhood. It says, if there were no age-specific and obligatory learning institution, childhood would be out of production. The youth of rich nations will be liberated from its destructiveness, and poor nations will cease attempting to rival the childishness of the rich. Moreover, it says, poor parents who want their children to go to school are less concerned about what they will learn than about the certificate and money that they will earn. And middle-class parents commit their children to a teacher's care to keep them from learning what the poor learn on the streets. Increasingly, educational research demonstrates that children learn most of what pretend to teach them from mere participation. Teachers, more often than not, obstruct such learning of such matters as goes on in school. So, if we remove the institution of school, we may be removing the institution of childhood. According to Illich, he says poor parents who want their children to go to school are less concerned about what they will learn than about the certificate and money they will earn. Well, I don't think I need to explain this because I think we are all very familiar with this. He says, school, by its very nature, tends to make a total claim on the time and energies of its participants. This, in turn, makes the teacher into custodian, preacher, and therapist. So we have three different roles that a teacher must play: the custodian, the preacher, and the therapist. He says, in each of these three roles, the teacher bases his authority on a different claim. The teacher, as custodian, without illusions of producing any profound learning, he drills his pupils in some basic routines. So basically, you are there being a policeman. What about the second? He says the teacher, as moralist, substitutes for parents, God, or the state. He indoctrinates the pupil about what is right or wrong, not only in school but also in society at large. Well, would be teacher as a priest or as a parent, the dad that we don't have or the mom that we don't have. And it says the teacher as therapist feels authorized to delve into the personal life of his pupil in order to help him grow as a person. So this will be like a kind of psychologist or doctor that will teach you what to do, not only as a preach, but also how to develop yourself in order to integrate better in the society. It says a teacher who combines these three powers contributes to the warping of the child much more than the laws of which establish his legal or economic minority or restrict his right to free assembly or above. Well, inside a class, we know that teacher has the authority, and there's no way that the pupil, that the student can resist much, because especially when they're kids, because, well, it's like going to church. You should get the word to get into society, and basically you should do what you're told. It talks in this passage, it talks about the ritualization of progress. So what is that? It says, the modern university confers the privilege of descent on those who have been tested and classified as potentially money makers or power holders. Schools select for each successive level those who have, at earlier stages in the game, proved themselves good risks for the established order. Certified college students fit only into a war which puts a price tag on their heads, thereby giving them the power to define the level of expectations in their society. The university thus has the effect of imposing consumer standards at work and at home, and it does so in every part of the world and under every political system. So if you get to university, that means you've been a good boy and you've done your duties, and you, as Alien says, you you prove yourself to be good risk for the order, meaning you will not stir things too much, because if you come to university, you've been already passing all the obstacles. So we are quite sure that you will not give up now on all the privilege that you will get from now on by compliance. So that defines what, and this standard, the university and our school system, it defines what can be expected from our society. So what can be expected in our society, that's what we will learn. That's what we learn in all our history of schooling and university. We come to learn that we should expect to get a degree, and that the degree in the university is the biggest achievement that someone can get in a school, in our education, how we understand education. Not only in every country you go, to have a college degree will be much better than not having anything, and you will be considered above your peers if they don't have it, and more educated if you don't have it. Let's see what it says. Students see their studies as the investment with the highest monetary return, and nations see them as a key factor in development. For the majority who primarily seek a college degree, the university has lost no prestige. But since 1968, it has visibly lost standing among its believers. More than a few reject degrees and prepare for life and counterculture outside the certified society. They seek support from each other to live with integrity while submitting to the academic ritual. And it also says, there is no question that at present the university offers a unique combination of circumstances which allows some of its members to criticize the whole of society. But the university provides this freedom only to those who have already been deeply initiated into the consumer society and into the need for some kind of obligatory public schooling. Meaning, well, you will only be able to criticize what the society works if you already passed the ritual of doing XYZ and doing all what's supposed to be doing all the way up to university. By the time that you get that, then you will maybe start to discuss what could be or could be done. Well, that's a whole lot of instruction and years and money to have. He says, well, many people are not so happy about the state of affairs and that you need that college degree to do certain things, particularly nowadays. So some people they say, well, I will not go to university, or I will not go to get this degree, or I will try to find another ways, which is very difficult, almost impossible. But nowadays, for example, with the internet, there are some resources that we can take advantage of. So there are a little resistance out there. That's called our counterculture, but it's not the rule. He says the school system today performs the threefold function common to the powerful churches throughout history. We cannot go beyond the consumer society unless we first understand that obligatory public schools inevitably reproduce such a society, no matter what is taught in them. Only a generation which grows up without obligatory schools will be able to recreate the university. So I think it's clear that if we put our understanding of education in the context of the consumer society, about how we understand obligatory public schools as things to be consumed, schools and education are something to be consumed as a product, we buy a car or we buy a house. We also buy education and consume education. If we come to understand this, that we are brought up to believe in such a ideology and we grow up thinking this way, to de-school ourselves, to de-school our children and our future generations, we really have to have a generation that will understand this and stop at least teach in a different way, in environments that are not what we understand by education nowadays. Maybe the future kids will understand what that means. Maybe we can build it up together now, but it's necessarily will be something different, not as something that what we have nowadays. And they only then will be able to recreate what a school could be or should be. Well, I think that's enough for today. I hope you like the video, the information, and I hope you keep watching the videos for more info. Thank you so much for your time, and I see you later.